The armor had been standing in the Temple of the Fallen for 3,000 years. Nobody knew who had made it or why. The people had found it buried deep under the ground on their home planet, Prime. It was inside the ruins of a city that was older than anything they had ever seen before. The armor was beautiful and scary at the same time. It was made of metal that seemed to be alive. The metal would shift and move like it was breathing. Strange symbols covered every part of it. The best scientists in the galaxy had tried to read these symbols, but no one could understand them. The symbols were not like any language that existed. High Commander Ran of the had spent his whole life studying the armor. He was an old alien now, with gray scales and tired eyes. He had seen hundreds of warriors try to wear the armor. Every single one of them had failed. The armor did not just refuse them. It hurt them. It threw them across the room like they were nothing. Some of them died. Some of them went crazy. The armor seemed to hate everyone who tried to touch it. They were the first to try. They sent their strongest fighters, their bravest heroes. The armor rejected all of them. Then the came. They were huge creatures with scales harder than steel. They thought their natural strength would help them. It did not. The armor threw them out just like everyone else. They were different. They did not have strong bodies, but they had powerful minds. They could read thoughts and control feelings. They were sure they could communicate with the armor. But when their best mind speaker touched the armor, she screamed so loud that the windows in the temple broke. She never spoke again after that day. Even the crystalline collective tried. They were not made of flesh and blood. They were living crystals, beings made of pure mineral. They thought maybe the armor rejected organic life. They were wrong. The armor rejected them too. In 3,000 years, the armor had killed 237 aliens from 47 different species. It had become a symbol of failure for the entire galaxy. Every powerful species had tried to claim it. Every single one had been humiliated. The Galactic Concord was the government that ruled most of the known galaxy. They had decided that the armor was too dangerous to keep trying. They put guards around the temple and made rules about who could attempt the trial, but they never stopped hoping that someone would succeed. Then the humans arrived. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. They were bobbies compared to the other species. They had been traveling between stars for 10,000 years. They had built their empire over 8,000 years. Humans were nothing. They had no special powers. They could not read minds. They did not have natural armor or claws or poison. They were soft, weak, and short-lived. When the human ship first appeared in space, most aliens thought it was a joke. The ship was small and ugly compared to the beautiful vessels of the older species. The humans inside were nervous and excited, like children seeing the ocean for the first time. Ambassador Lily Monroe was the leader of the human group. She was a small woman with dark hair and brown eyes. She was 45 years old, which the aliens thought was very young for such an important job. But humans did not live as long as most species, so they had to grow up fast. Lily was smart and careful. She watched everything and said little. When the Galactic Council welcomed humanity into the Concord as a minor member, she thanked them politely. She did not argue when they gave humans the worst seats in the council chamber. She did not complain when other ambassadors ignored her or made jokes about her species. But Lily was always paying attention. When someone mentioned the armor in the Temple of the Fallen, she became very interested. She asked questions. She read every report she could find. She spent long nights studying the history of the failed attempts. One day, during a boring council meeting about trade routes, Lily raised her hand and asked a question that made everyone stop talking. Has anyone ever tried asking the armor what it wants? The council chamber went silent. Then someone laughed. Then everyone was laughing. The armor was a machine, they told her. It was a relic. It did not want anything. It just existed. Lily did not laugh. She waited until the noise died down, and then she spoke again. "The symbols on the armor are not random," she said. "I have been studying them. They are not a language that tells information. They are a language that shares feelings. Whoever made this armor was trying to communicate something emotional, not logical." High Commander Rand stared at her. In 3,000 years, no one had ever suggested this. The scientists had always tried to decode the symbols like a code or a map. They had never thought about feelings. "What do you think the armor feels?" he asked. Lily was quiet for a moment. "I think it feels lonely," she said. "I think it has been waiting for someone who understands that." More laughter filled the chamber. The idea that a piece of metal could feel lonely was ridiculous to most of the aliens. But Rand did not laugh. He had spent his whole life with the armor. He had watched it reject hundreds of warriors. And sometimes, late at night when he was alone in the temple, he had felt something strange coming from it. He had always told himself it was his imagination. Now he was not so sure. The traditional offer was made to the humans. Every new species was given the chance to attempt the armor trial. Most species saw it as an honor. They sent their greatest champions. Humanity had no champions. They had scientists, farmers, teachers, and pilots. They had ordinary people living ordinary lives. Everyone expected the humans to say no. What was the point? Their weak bodies would be destroyed by the armor. They had no chance. But Lily Monroe did not say no. She said she would think about it. That night she called a meeting of all the humans on Prime. There were only 23 of them. She told them about the armor and what she believed about the symbols. She said that maybe, just maybe, a human could succeed where all the other species had failed. Not because humans were stronger, not because humans were smarter, but because humans knew something that the powerful species had forgotten. Humans knew how to be kind to things that were different from them. Humans knew how to feel sorry for things that were hurting. Humans knew how to say, "I understand," and mean it. Lily asked if anyone wanted to volunteer. One hand went up. It belonged to a shuttle pilot named Daniel Hayes. He was not special in any way. He was just a man who had grown up on a farm and wanted to see the stars. But when he heard Lily talk about the lonely armor waiting in the temple, something inside him wanted to help. He did not know that his decision would change the galaxy forever. Daniel Hayes was not the kind of man that stories were written about. He was 43 years old. He had brown hair that was starting to turn gray. He had a friendly face and a quiet voice. He laughed easily and worried too much. He was the kind of person you would forget 5 minutes after meeting him. He had grown up in Nebraska, on a small farm where his family raised corn and cattle. His parents worked hard and did not have much money. Daniel learned early that life was not easy, but it could still be good if you were kind to people and did your best. He had been married once. Her name was Corinne, and they had been happy for a while. But Daniel spent too much time looking at the stars, dreaming about what was out there. Corinne wanted a husband who was present, not one whose mind was always somewhere else. They divorced when their daughter Sophie was 8 years old. Sophie was the best thing in Daniel's life. She was 19 now, studying languages at a university back on Earth. She thought her father was boring. She loved him anyway. Daniel had joined the Earth Defense Coalition because it was the only way he could afford to travel to space. He was not a soldier. He was just a pilot who moved supplies and people from one place to another. He had never fired a weapon in combat. He had never done anything brave or important. When Ambassador Monroe asked for volunteers, Daniel did not know why he raised his hand. Maybe it was because he felt sorry for the armor. Maybe it was because he was tired of being nobody. Maybe it was just curiosity. Whatever the reason, his hand went up before he could think about it. Lily looked at him for a long moment. She saw nothing special, just an ordinary man with ordinary eyes. But there was something in those eyes that she recognized. It was the look of someone who cared about things that other people ignored. "Are you sure?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "Someone should try," he said, "and I do not think strength is what the armor is looking for." The next morning, Daniel stood outside the Temple of the Fallen. The building was enormous, made of black stone that seemed to swallow light. Armed guards from 6 different species surrounded it. They all looked at Daniel like he was already dead. High Commander Rand met him at the entrance. The old studied the human with confusion. This small, soft creature was going to attempt what the greatest warriors in the galaxy had failed to do. It seemed like a waste of time. "You understand that this will probably kill you," Rand said. "I understand," Daniel replied. "Why are you doing this? You have nothing to prove. Your species has only been in space for 50 years. No one expects anything from you." Daniel thought about the question. "Maybe that is exactly why I should try," he said. "I am not trying to prove anything. I just want to meet whoever made that armor. I want to understand why they made something so sad." Rand did not know what to say. In 3,000 years, no one had ever called the armor sad. They walked into the temple together. The inside was dark and cold. The walls were covered with pictures of all the warriors who had tried and failed. Some of the pictures showed their bodies after the armor rejected them. It was not pleasant to look at. The armor stood at the center of the main chamber. It was bigger than Daniel expected, at least 7 feet tall. The living metal shifted and moved in the dim light. The strange symbols glowed faintly, like they were trying to say something. Daniel stopped walking. He could feel something coming from the armor. It was not a sound or a smell. It was more like a feeling, a pressure in his chest. He realized that the armor was watching him. He took off his shoes. Rand made a surprised sound. "What are you doing?" "It seems polite," Daniel said. "I am entering someone else's home. I should show respect." He walked forward slowly, barefoot on the cold stone floor. The other aliens had always marched up to the armor in full battle gear, announcing their names and titles and achievements. Daniel did none of that. He just walked quietly, like he was approaching a frightened animal. When he was close enough to touch the armor, he stopped. He could feel the metal humming with energy. It was ready to throw him across the room like it had done to everyone else. It was ready to kill him. Daniel did something that no one had ever done before. He spoke to the armor like it was a person. "Hello," he said softly. "My name is Daniel. I am nobody important. I am just a pilot from a small planet that most of the galaxy has never heard of." The armor did not move. The humming continued. "I read about you," Daniel continued. "About all the people you have rejected. I am sorry that happened. It must have been hard, waiting here alone for so long, having everyone come to you wanting something but nobody asking how you feel." The humming changed. It became softer, less angry. "I'm not here to take you or use you," Daniel said. "I do not want power or glory. I just wanted to say that I am sorry. I am sorry that nobody ever asked how you were doing. I am sorry that everyone treated you like a thing instead of a someone." For a long moment, nothing happened. Rand held his breath. The guards gripped their weapons. Everyone waited for the armor to explode with violence like it always did. Instead, the armor began to open. The metal split down the middle, slowly and gently. Inside was not the dark emptiness that everyone expected. Inside was soft light, warm and welcoming. The armor was inviting Daniel in. Rand could not believe what he was seeing. 3,000 years, hundreds of deaths, and this ordinary human had succeeded in less than a minute. Daniel stepped into the armor. The metal closed around him like a hug from an old friend. Suddenly, his mind was filled with images and memories that were not his own. He saw a beautiful planet covered with gardens and towers. He saw beings made of light and sound, creating wonders that made the stars look dim. He saw them building the armor with love and hope, putting everything they were into it. Then he saw them die. He saw ships filling the sky, burning the gardens and smashing the towers. He saw the beings of light screaming as they were hunted down and killed. He saw the armor watching, helpless, as everything it loved was destroyed. The beings were called the architects. They had built most of the technology that the galaxy used today. The jump gates, the translators, the machines that made dead planets alive. They had shared everything freely, wanting nothing in return except friendship. The galaxy had repaid them with genocide. The other species had feared what the architects might build next. They had formed an alliance and wiped them out, down to the last child. The armor had been the final creation. It had been designed to wait, to watch, to remember. It was supposed to find someone worthy of the architect's legacy, someone who approached with kindness instead of greed, someone who saw a sad thing and wanted to help. For 3,000 years it had waited. Everyone who came wanted power. Everyone who came saw the armor as a weapon or a prize. No one had ever seen it as a friend. Until Daniel. Through his tears, Daniel felt the armor's joy. After so long alone, it had finally found what it was looking for. Not a warrior, not a conqueror, just a kind man who knew how to say sorry. Outside the temple, the news spread across the galaxy. The impossible had happened. A human had claimed the architect armor. And everything was about to change. The news traveled faster than light. Within hours, every planet in the galactic conquered knew what had happened on Prime. A human, a member of the youngest and weakest species in the galaxy, had done what no one else could do. The architect armor had accepted him. Daniel Hayes woke up in a hospital room. At least he thought it was a hospital room. The walls were white and the air smelled clean. But the equipment around him was not human. Strange machines beeped and hummed. Alien doctors with too many eyes looked at screens he could not read. Lily Monroe was sitting next to his bed. She looked tired but happy. "How do you feel?" she asked. Daniel took a moment to think about the question. He felt different, stronger somehow, but also lighter, like he had been carrying a heavy weight his whole life and someone had finally taken it off his shoulders. "I feel okay," he said. "The armor." He looked down at his arm. The skin looked normal, but when he concentrated, he could feel something underneath. The armor was still there, merged with his body. It had become part of him. "It will not come off," Lily said gently. "The doctors have tried. The armor has bonded with you permanently. They are saying it is some kind of symbiosis. You and the armor are one being now." Daniel should have been scared. A few days ago, he had been a simple pilot. Now he was fused with an ancient alien weapon that had killed hundreds of people. But he did not feel afraid. The armor was not threatening him. It was protecting him. He could feel its presence in his mind like a warm blanket on a cold night. "It talks to me," he said. "Not in words, in feelings and pictures. It showed me what happened to the architects." Lily leaned forward. "Tell me." So Daniel told her. He described the beautiful world of the architects, their gentle nature, their incredible creations. He told her about the fear that had grown in the other species, the alliance that had formed against them, the genocide that had wiped them out. When he finished, Lily was crying. They killed an entire species because they were afraid of what they might build. "Yes," Daniel said, "and the armor remembers everything. It knows which species were involved. It knows who gave the orders. It has been waiting 3,000 years for justice." Lily wiped her eyes. "What kind of justice? Revenge?" Daniel shook his head. "No, the architects did not want revenge. They wanted to be remembered. They wanted someone to know that they existed, that they mattered, that they tried to make the galaxy better. The armor was supposed to find someone who would share their story, not someone who would continue the killing." Outside the hospital, the galaxy was in chaos. The High Council demanded that humanity surrender the armor immediately. They claimed it was their property because it had been found on their planet. When Lily pointed out that they had never been able to use it, they got angry. The Empire was even more direct. They sent a message to Earth saying that if the armor was not handed over within 30 days, they would declare war. Their ships were already moving toward human space. The collective tried a different approach. They sent their best mind speakers to visit Daniel, hoping to take control of him through telepathy. The armor protected him. The mind speakers left with terrible headaches and could not remember their own names for a week. Ambassador Monroe worked without sleep, trying to calm everyone down, but she was fighting a losing battle. The galaxy was afraid. A species that had been considered worthless now possessed the most powerful technology ever discovered. The balance of power had shifted overnight. Daniel stayed in the hospital, learning what the armor could do. It was not just protection. The armor was a library. It contained all the knowledge of the architects, everything they had ever learned or built. Daniel could access this knowledge through his mental link with the armor. He could see blueprints for machines that could cure any disease. He could read plans for engines that could travel between galaxies. He could study weapons that could destroy stars. The weapons frightened him. He asked the armor why the architects had created such terrible things. The armor showed him the answer in pictures. The weapons had been built after the attacks started. The architects had hoped they would never need them. They had tried to negotiate peace, offering to share everything they knew. The other species had refused. They did not want partnership. They wanted the architects gone. Even with weapons that could have won the war, the architects had not used them. They had chosen to die rather than become killers. They had put their hopes into the armor, trusting that someday someone would be different. 3 weeks after the bonding, an assassination team tried to kill Daniel. They came at night when most of the guards were sleeping. They were highly trained soldiers, the best they had. They had special weapons designed to cut through any armor. They had drugs that could paralyze any organic being. None of it mattered. The armor sensed them before they entered the building. It woke Daniel up and showed him exactly where they were. When the first assassin broke through the window, Daniel was already waiting. The armor flowed over his body, covering him in living metal. The assassin fired his weapon. The shot bounced off harmlessly. Daniel grabbed the attacker and threw him against the wall. The armor gave him strength he had never imagined. The fight lasted less than a minute. 5 assassins, the best warriors their species had to offer, were defeated by a man who had never been in a real fight before. The armor had made him something more than human. But Daniel did not kill them. He could have. The armor showed him a dozen ways to end their lives. Instead, he broke their weapons and tied them up. When the guards arrived, the assassins were alive and unhurt. Lily asked him why he had shown mercy. "Because the armor told me something," Daniel said. "It recognized them, not these individuals but their species. They were one of the races that attacked the architects. They helped lead the genocide." Lily felt cold. "And you still did not kill them." Daniel looked at her with sad eyes. "The architects died because the galaxy gave in to fear. They killed an innocent species because they were afraid of what might happen. I will not make the same mistake. I will not become the monster they are afraid of, no matter what they do to me." The armor hummed softly against his skin. Through their link, Daniel felt something he had not expected. Pride. The armor was proud of him. After 3,000 years of watching violence and greed, it had finally found someone who chose kindness over revenge. Someone who could break the cycle that had destroyed its creators. Daniel smiled. For the first time since the bonding, he felt like he understood why the armor had chosen him. It was not because he was strong or smart or special. It was because he was the kind of person who would rather be hurt than hurt someone else. In a galaxy full of warriors and conquerors, that made him the rarest thing of all. 6 months had passed since Daniel Hayes became bonded with the architect armor. In that time, everything had gotten worse. The major powers of the galaxy had formed a new alliance. They called themselves the Preservation Coalition. 11 different species had joined together with one goal: to take the armor away from humanity, no matter the cost. They had assembled a fleet of over 100,000 warships, battle cruisers the size of cities, fighters that moved faster than light, weapons that could crack planets in half. It was the largest military force ever gathered in galactic history. Against them, humanity had almost nothing. 18 colony ships that had been built for exploration, not war. A small defense fleet of maybe 200 vessels. No allies, no experience, no chance. The ultimatum had been delivered 3 days ago. Earth had 1 week to surrender the armor. If they refused, the coalition would attack. Every human world would be destroyed. Every human ship would be hunted down. The species would be wiped out completely. Daniel stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, facing the representatives of the coalition. Behind him were Ambassador Monroe and a small group of human officials. They looked scared. They had every right to be. High Commander Rand spoke for the coalition. The old looked tired, but his voice was firm. "This is your final chance," he said. "Give us the armor and your species will be allowed to live. Refuse, and you will share the fate of the architects." Daniel felt the armor stir beneath his skin. It was angry. Through their link, it showed him what it could do. It showed him how to disable the entire coalition fleet with a single command. It showed him how to turn their weapons against them. It showed him how to strike at their, destroying their cities and their people. The armor had waited 3,000 years for this moment. It could finally punish the species that had murdered its creators. All it needed was for Daniel to say yes. Daniel said no. He pushed the images away and stepped forward. The alien representatives watched him with fear and hatred in their eyes. They saw a monster, a threat, a weapon pointed at their hearts. He needed to show them something different. "I understand why you are afraid," he said. His voice was calm and quiet. "You look at me and you see everything that could go wrong. You see a weak species suddenly holding power beyond anything you have known. You think we will use this power to hurt you, to rule you, to make you pay for things that happened before we were born." The chamber was silent. Everyone was listening. "The armor has shown me what you did to the architects," Daniel continued. "I know which species gave the orders. I know which leaders signed the death warrants. I know where the mass graves are hidden. The armor remembers everything, and it has wanted revenge for 3,000 years." Fear flashed across the faces of the coalition representatives. This was what they had been afraid of. This was why they had gathered their fleet. "But I am not going to give it revenge," Daniel said. "And do you know why? Because revenge is what started all of this. The architects were killed because you were afraid of what they might do, not what they had done, what they might do. You destroyed an entire species based on fear of the future." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative. "I refuse to continue that cycle. I refuse to become the monster you expect me to be. The armor gives me the power to hurt you, but power does not mean anything if you use it wrong. The architects understood that. They could have won the war. They had weapons that would have saved them, but they chose to die rather than become killers. They put their hope in this armor, trusting that someday someone would be better than they were." Rand spoke slowly. "What are you saying?" Daniel took a deep breath. This was the moment that would decide everything. "Humanity will share the armor's knowledge with everyone. All of it. Every blueprint, every formula, every secret the architects left behind. We will give it away freely, without conditions, to every species in the galaxy." Shocked sounds filled the chamber. This was not what anyone had expected. A species with overwhelming power was offering to share it with their enemies. Ambassador Monroe stepped forward with a tablet. "We have prepared a formal proposal," she said. "The architect database will be made available to all member species of the Conquered. In exchange, the coalition will disband, and humanity will be granted full membership with equal rights." The coalition representatives looked at each other. They did not know what to do. Every species they had ever encountered had reacted to threats with either surrender or violence. The humans were doing neither. They were offering a gift. A general spoke harshly. "This is a trick. You will share some knowledge now, then use the rest to enslave us later." Daniel shook his head. "The armor's database will be completely open. Any species can verify that nothing is being held back. We will hide nothing." "Why would you do this?" Rand asked. "You could rule the galaxy. You could make us your servants. Why would you give that away?" Daniel thought about the question. He thought about his daughter Sophie, about his ex-wife Corinne, about the farm in Nebraska where he had grown up. He thought about all the ordinary people on Earth who just wanted to live their lives in peace. "Because ruling people who hate and fear you is not a life," he said. "The architects tried to share everything and they were murdered for it. Maybe things will be different this time. Maybe they will not, but we have to try. If we answer your fear with violence, then nothing will ever change. The galaxy will keep repeating the same mistakes forever." The chamber fell silent again. Daniel could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. This moment would be remembered for thousands of years, either as the beginning of something new or as the last foolish hope of a doomed species. Rand looked at Daniel for a long time. The old had spent his whole life with the armor. He had watched it reject everyone who came to it seeking power. Now he understood why. The armor had not been looking for a warrior. It had been looking for someone who would do what the architects had always wanted to do. Someone who would share instead of conquer. Someone who would trust instead of fear. "I need to speak with my government," Rand said finally. His voice was different now, softer, less certain. Over the next 2 days, the galaxy held its breath. Messages flew back and forth between 100 worlds. Arguments and debates raged in government chambers. Military commanders demanded action. Scientists begged for the chance to study the architect knowledge. The vote happened on the 3rd day. It was the closest vote in the history of the galactic conquered. Species that had been enemies for centuries voted on the same side. Alliances that had lasted fell apart. Old hatreds and new hopes battled for control. In the end, peace won by 7 votes. The Preservation Coalition was disbanded. Humanity was granted full membership in the conquered. And for the first time in 3,000 years, the knowledge of the architects would be shared with the galaxy. Daniel Hayes stood alone in his room that night, looking out at the stars. The armor hummed contentedly against his skin. Through their link, he felt something he had never felt from it before. Hope. After 3,000 years of darkness, hope had finally returned. 3 years had passed since the day the galaxy chose peace. Daniel Hayes stood on the observation deck of the Pioneer, the first human-built starship capable of traveling between galaxies. Through the massive windows, he could see the shipyard where it had been constructed. Dozens of vessels floated nearby, built by species that had once wanted humanity destroyed. The galaxy looked different now. The architect knowledge had spread to every corner of civilized space. Diseases that had killed billions were now cured with simple treatments. Worlds that had been dying from pollution were cleaned and restored. The jump gate network had been expanded to reach systems that had been isolated for centuries. Hungry people were fed. Sick people were healed. The impossible had become ordinary. Not everyone was happy about the changes. Some species had built their power on controlling technology. When that technology became available to everyone, their power disappeared. There had been rebellions and protests. Assassination attempts against Daniel had become almost routine. The armor protected him, but he was tired of being a target. Old hatreds did not disappear overnight. The Still looked at humans with suspicion. The Still talked about the good old days when they could simply take what they wanted. Change was slow and painful and often took steps backward. But something had shifted in the soul of the galaxy. For the first time, the different species were working together because they wanted to, not because they had to. They had seen what cooperation could create. They had tasted hope, and they wanted more. Sophie Hayes walked onto the observation deck. Daniel's daughter had grown into a remarkable young woman. At 22, she had become one of the leading experts on architect languages. She had dedicated her life to translating the texts that her father could access through the armor. She wanted everyone to understand who the architects had been, not just what they had built. "The delegation from the Crystalline Collective is here," she said. "They want to discuss the new communication network." Daniel smiled. The Crystalline Collective had been one of the hardest species to convince. They were ancient beings, older than most stars, and they did not trust organic life. But Sophie had spent 2 years building a relationship with them. She had learned their strange way of thinking. She had earned their respect. "I will let you handle it," Daniel said. "They like you better than me anyway." Sophie laughed. "That is because you make them nervous. You are the human who carries 3,000 years of revenge on his skin. I am just a girl who likes old books." She was joking, but there was truth in her words. Daniel had become a symbol whether he wanted to be or not. When people looked at him, they saw power. They saw the armor that could have destroyed their worlds. They saw the choice he had made not to use it. Sometimes Daniel missed being nobody. He missed flying shuttle routes and eating bad food in cramped cabins. He missed the simple life of a man who did not matter. But then he would look out at the galaxy, and he would see all the good that had come from his choice. He would see former enemies building homes together. He would see children from different species playing in the same parks. He would see hope spreading like light from a sunrise. It was worth it. All of it was worth it. Lily Monroe found him still standing at the window an hour later. The former ambassador had retired from politics. She now ran a school on Earth where young humans learned about alien cultures. She was happier than Daniel had ever seen her. "The council meeting starts soon," she said. "They want your opinion on the Outer Rim expansion." Daniel sighed. "They always want my opinion. I keep telling them that I am not a leader. I am just a pilot who got lucky." Lily smiled. "You are the man who taught the galaxy that kindness is stronger than fear. I think that makes you exactly the kind of leader we need." They walked together through the corridors of the Pioneer. Humans and aliens moved around them, working side by side on tasks that would have been impossible 3 years ago. An engineer argued with a human scientist about engine designs. A diplomat shared tea with an officer. A group of children from 5 different species ran past, laughing at some joke that did not need translation. The armor hummed softly against Daniel's skin. Through their link, he felt its contentment. The last creation of the architects had finally fulfilled its purpose. It had found someone worthy. It had brought hope back to a galaxy that had forgotten how to dream. The council chamber was full when Daniel arrived. Representatives from every member species sat in their assigned seats. They fell silent when he entered. Even after 3 years, his presence still commanded attention. Daniel took his place at the speaking platform. He looked around the room at faces that had once been enemies. Some of them still did not like humanity. Some of them still thought the armor should have been theirs. But they were here, sitting together, working toward common goals. "Before we begin," Daniel said, "I want to share something." He reached out through his link with the armor. Images appeared in the air above him, projected by technology that the architects had developed long ago. The images showed a beautiful world covered with gardens and towers. They showed beings of light creating wonders that made the stars seem dim. "These were the architects," Daniel said. "They built most of what we use today. They wanted nothing except to help, to share, to make life better for everyone, and we killed them for it." The chamber was completely silent. "I show you this not to make you feel guilty," Daniel continued. "The people who made those decisions are long dead. What matters is what we do now. The architects created the armor because they believed that someday someone would be different. They believed that the galaxy could learn from its mistakes. They believed in us. He looked around the room one more time. We have a choice. We can honor their memory by building something better. We can prove that their faith was not misplaced. Or we can fall back into old patterns, fighting over scraps while the universe passes us by. He stepped down from the platform. The armor pulsed warmly, sharing feelings that words could not express. Gratitude, love, peace. I believe we can be better, Daniel said. That is all I have ever believed. Now let us get to work. The meeting continued for hours, filled with arguments and compromises and small victories. It was messy and frustrating and slow, but it was progress. Real progress, bought with patience and trust and a willingness to see the good in others. That night Daniel stood alone in his quarters aboard the Pioneer. He looked out at the stars that had always called to him, even when he was a boy on a farm in Nebraska. They seemed closer now, more welcoming. The universe was not as cold as he had once thought. The armor spoke to him in feelings as it always did. It showed him the memory of the last architect, the one who had created it. The being had been dying, but there was no fear in its heart. Only hope. Only faith that someday the armor would find what it was looking for. Daniel sent back a feeling of his own, a promise that he would never stop trying, a promise that the architects would never be forgotten. He thought about Sophie, who was probably still working on translations somewhere. He thought about Lily, who had believed in humanity when no one else did. He thought about all the ordinary people who had become extraordinary just by choosing to be kind. The galaxy was not perfect. It probably never would be. There would always be fear and hatred and violence. There would always be those who wanted to take instead of give. But there would also be hope. There would be people who chose to trust, even when trust was dangerous. There would be people who reached out across the darkness, looking for connection instead of conflict. The architects had believed that such people existed. They had staked everything on that belief, and in the end, they had been right. Daniel Hayes, the ordinary man who had changed the galaxy, closed his eyes and smiled. The armor hummed its approval. Tomorrow there would be more work to do, more problems to solve, more arguments to settle. But tonight there was peace, and for the first time in 3,000 years, the future looked bright.